to pay the money and play the game, you can go in for a random shot and you can save yourself a couple $100 by not buying points in Wyoming.
They're not giving more preference to the guys that have been loyal to them.
We're 25 years in and we haven't cleaned the top out yet.
Welcome to the Built to Hunt podcast, brought to you by the team of hunt advisors at the Huntin magazine, where we are dedicated to helping our members go on more hunts with better information. Join Huntin today at huntinfool.com.
Welcome to the Built to Hunt podcast today. We wanted to highlight some of the new changes that we've got in accordance to Wyoming's application period that is now open for non-residents to apply. So we've got our local Wyoming expert, Robert Hanneman, on the phone today. Robert, welcome.
How's it going there, Austin? You guys having fun in the office?
We are having fun in the office. Are you having fun up there in your office?
I am just doing nothing but working, and I'm assuming that you guys are unfortunately having to do the exact same thing I am, just nonstop calls this time of year.
'Tis the season. Seems like time is passing by faster than ever. We've got pretty much Wyoming's the only state open that's coming up soon. Arizona is still a joke, and they haven't opened their draw system yet. But let's go through a couple of these Wyoming changes. And the big one I see is guys that are applying for sheep and moose no longer have to participate in purchasing a preference point at the time of application. And why is that a big deal? Let's explain it to everybody why that is a big deal.
Well, I mean, like I've got 18 moose points in Wyoming, and I started years and years ago. And back in those days, I would just write a $7 check, send it to Wyoming. I get my points for moose. I get my points for sheep. And then as things changed, they increased it to $75, and then they increased it to $150 a few years ago. And $150 for a moose point, I mean, that's more than a Huntin membership. So, I mean, it's just crazy to even think that. So a lot of guys dropped out, and the moose population has plummeted. 20 years ago, like when I started applying, there was 75% more moose tags available in the state of Wyoming. A lot of that has to do with the wolf predation and, not being able to hunt wolves for a lot of years, and moose like to stay in deep snow and wolves thrive on them. So when you take into account all of that, years ago, I was like, I'm only 2 or 3 points out. 15 years later, I'm still 2 or 3 points out. So Wyoming has decided that you no longer have to purchase your moose preference point. It was always mandatory before. Like if you wanted to apply, you were forced to buy that for for sheep and for moose. And that's $300. Well, in reality, 3/4 of the tags, 75% of the moose and sheep tags are going to go to the people with max points. Well, if you're not on 2 decades worth of points, you're more than likely never going to reach that time frame. I'm 18 points. I'm 41 years old. I'm hoping to live long enough that I do get my moose and sheep tag. But when you look at the numbers, if a guy started out today, or I didn't start applying my kids because I was like, why would I want to donate that much money to Wyoming? And they're always going to be in the random draw. They're never going to be in the preference point draw. So Wyoming this year decided, hey, we're not going to force people to buy points anymore. If you would like to buy the point, you still can. If you don't want to buy the point, you don't have to. So what that did was it reduced the barrier of entry to applying for moose by $150. So now you can apply for moose, go for, one of the 5 or 6 random draw tags, put in for there, and just think of you're never going to have any points. You're always going in for a random draw. And the crazy thing is like, let's just say a guy starting this year, we'll say, Austin, this is your first time ever applying for moose. You're going in with 0 points and you're never going to buy a point. So you're always going to be 0 points. I've got 18 points and that's not enough to force the tag. So me and you are in the random draw. Well, you would think I've got 18 points. I've got to have a better chance of drawing the tag than you do. That would be wrong. Me and you are 100% equal. You with 0 points, me with 18. We only get one name in that random draw hat. So everybody, no matter the points, has one name in there. Whoever draws that tag gets it. So, for sheep, we got 4 units that are available on random, typically to non-residents. And for moose, we have 5 units. So if a guy's willing to pay the money and play the game, you can go in for a random shot and you can save yourself a couple $100 by not buying points in Wyoming.
I mean, that's a wealth of information there you just shared with our listeners, and hopefully you blew some minds there. I'm sure we did. So we get a little bit confused on the terminology, and oftentimes we think points are just points. And if you want points to be bonus points in your mind, they are. Well, they're not in this case. They are a true preference point. So you do not get extra chances. We can't emphasize that enough. And you never have got extra chances. This is not a change. This is how Wyoming does it. So that $150 sting they stuck you with every year was just to make you feel good and tell you you're one step closer. But if you look at our chart of how many people have points ahead of you, unless you're sitting at that 2 decades worth of points, you're never going to catch those guys in front of you. There's just not enough tags. So let's talk about, should we pay the $150 or should we not, Robert? A guy who's sitting on, say, 18, 19 sheep or moose points, should he buy that point, and under what conditions should he buy that? What if he's 60 or 70 years old? Should he?
So that's one thing that's unique to Wyoming is you got to look at how long it's going to take you to draw. And, we have a point breakdown of how many guys have points. There's over 11,000 that hold sheep points. There's over 10,000 non-residents that hold moose points. So you need to look at that. And we'll take sheep, for example. Last year, I believe there was, 46 sheep tags issued in Wyoming. And, 6 of those went in the random draw. So 40 of those went to the max points. So we can look at how many guys are above us, and we'll just say that nothing's going to change. It's going to continue being 40 every year. How many years is that going to take to eat through all of those guys to get to me? If you look at that, and, unfortunately, we're going to have to say some guys are going to quit. Some guys are going to pass away, so we could even say, let's say 80 people a year are going to drop away ahead of me. You need to look at how old you are, how many points you have, and how many years it's going to take to get to you. And if that number is in a number where you don't think you're going to be hunting sheep in the mountains or, moose in the mountains, then I think, don't buy a point. Just go in for the random draw. That's one thing we're seeing in Wyoming is, most of these sheep units that are random, or units 2 through 5, they're high country, they're horseback, wilderness type hunts. Most of the guys that were lucky enough to get in on the application system when it started years ago that are now in that 21 to 24 points that are drawing these tags, most of those guys are late 60s to 80s. That's hard for, the outfitters or people to go sheep hunting at 10,000 feet when you're at that age class. Unfortunately, there's some really physically easy, great sheep hunting in Wyoming, but those units are taking 25 plus points and don't have any random tags. So, a lot of the guys that are aging out of hunting the high country, they're still trying to catch those. And it's a really sad deal, but a lot more guys are going to die with sheep points than are going to go sheep hunting.
That's very, very bleak, right? For a guy who's saying, I'm almost there. Max is 26. Well, it's point creep forever until enough people die off because there are just not enough tags to clear out these pools, especially once you start hitting those huge increases where people started buying points and people start applying. You hit 300 plus people at every point level. That's a lot.
So in that point level that you're seeing on the moose and the sheep list, and that's at 21 points where it makes this catastrophic jump, that was the first year that Wyoming let us buy points for $7 a piece. So that's when everybody jumped in. The guys that are above that were sending all the money in like we are today. But I mean, when you take a point system, let's just say sheep, for example, there's 26 years of applications in here. It's a very mature point system. There's still 5 guys that haven't drawn after 26 years. And then there's 18 with 25 and there's 25 with 24 points. I mean, we're 25 years in and we haven't cleaned the top out yet. So if you're at 17, 18, 16, you really think you're going to catch one of those? There's a lot of guys above you. And I mean, it's a fairly sad deal to think about.
It is. But I think the point of this information we're sharing with you is that it is a sad deal thinking you're going to catch that. But they just opened up a window where it can be $150 cheaper per species and you still can participate in that random draw. Like me, for example, I have a Rocky sheep, so therefore I do not apply in Wyoming's Rocky sheep draw because with the having to front the full license fee plus the 2.5% transaction fee plus a $150 point fee, I was out. You're over $200 per year, non-refundable. I was out. I didn't want to apply. But now you took away that $150 tax that everyone had to pay that didn't help them in any way. Now I'm like, maybe I should apply. And so our random odds are going to be worse, right, this year?
100%. For guys that are just going to play this game with no points, or are going to drop out of points and just apply, think of it as like an Oregon or an Idaho. You are going to be looking, for the most part, I would say odds are going to bounce between the units anywhere between 1 in 300 and 1 in 800. So if you feel like, and I say this all the time, like if you're at a sheep banquet, and the announcer says, hey, we're selling 400 sheep tags tickets here for a raffle, and it's $200, would you be willing to buy that? If you're a guy that says yes, maybe look at applying for Wyoming. It has great odds compared to a lot of other states, and everyone's going to be equal in this random draw. So that's the nice thing, is like, think of it as a New Mexico and Idaho and Oregon. If you are 40, 45, 50 and you just like, hey, I want to be a sheep hunter, these are states where you're probably going to have a lot better odds than these mature point systems, like Montana or Arizona or Nevada, where there's guys that their points are helping them in the draw a lot more than this. So no, I'm a huge fan of it. When it comes to the moose, most of the moose draw odds are still going to be in that 1% to 2% at best. So if you really want moose, I'm still going to tell guys to apply in Idaho. If you don't want to apply in Idaho, or you're doing sheep in Idaho, maybe throw in Wyoming. But in reality, there's just a handful of tags. There's 5 units that are available as of right now. And if you want to upfront the money and go for 1% to 2% odds, go for moose. But it's definitely, I think, going to draw a lot more sheep hunters than it is moose hunters.
Gotcha. Now, comparing those two states, I think that's interesting. Idaho, you're saying much better odds depending on the unit you're picking, applying as a non-resident. Wyoming, poorer odds for applying as a non-resident for moose. But now with this change, the Wyoming moose out of pocket is going to be substantially cheaper than all the fees and the non-refundable license that you're going to pay for in Idaho. Is that right?
Yeah. Have you ran the numbers on that and how much it's going to cost someone with the 2.5% and the application fee?
Yeah. So we ran that in Idaho. You're going to be almost $300 between your non-resident hunting license, access fee, application fee, and the non-refundable transaction fee to apply for moose there, versus Wyoming, $65 out of pocket after you get your refund if you don't draw. That's a big difference.
It is a big difference, but is it $65? You think you're 1% odds for Wyoming, we'll say, because of people jump in, and we're $300 for upwards of, there's some that have great odds, some that have poor odds, maybe throw out, 54, and it might be 5 to 10% odds in Idaho. So you just got to weigh that out, so, for $65, 1% odds, that's not bad for Wyoming, but we'll know a lot more next year when everyone applies and we kind of see what happens.
Yeah, for sure. So the system in Wyoming will not stop you from applying for any unit you want. I think that's important, because if a guy just looks through the magazine and says, oh man, they kill big sheep and big wide moose in these units, I'm going to put in for those and hope to get lucky. There is not a random draw under the current system in those units. You must make sure you look at a unit that typically has random permits. We show you last year's data, and that's what you want to apply for.
And historically, units 1 through 5 in Wyoming for sheep always had random tags. 1 had a little bit of a die-off. They cut the tags back to where it was only 3 non-resident tags, so we lost that random tag. So if you're applying for sheep this year and you don't have the points to draw, or you're not buying a point, I would highly recommend units 2, 3, 4, or 5. Those are going to be the areas that are going to have random tags. Unit 3 and 5 both had 2 random tags last year, where 2 and 4 had 1. The odds bounce around every year. Guys look at where it was easiest and they switch to that. So, typically those are the ones that are going to have it. On moose, you're going to be looking at units 5, 24, 25, 26, and 38. And if you are a trophy hunter, 38 is one of the best units in the state and has the potential for just absolutely giant bulls, snowy mountains down in southern Wyoming. And if you were looking for a Magnum bull, put in for 38. 26 is awesome too. It's got a lot of that region G South country by Kimmer. There's a few good bull moose in there. 25's got a lot of private, but they kill some great bulls in there. That's a good option for someone wanting to go guided. 24 is kind of a moose factory, a lot of younger bulls, and kind of the same with 5. So in reality, those units you could all do it yourself hunt for moose because you don't have much wilderness. When you go to the 5 or 4 sheep units, all of those have a lot of wilderness, and the one that you'd probably have the best chance of killing a ram outside of the wilderness would be unit 5.
Oh, all good information, and you got to consider and listen to what Robert just said if you're applying there, no matter where you're at in the game. Now, a couple other hypotheticals, Robert. Some guys have said, wait, you're telling me to not buy points in Wyoming anymore, but still participate in the random draw, save some money, use it elsewhere. But what if the bighorn sheep populations just explode and do very well? There's a lot more tags or moose. Let's look forward and say what could change population-wise, what could change draw sequence-wise that I will wish I still had points and been building them every year. What do you think they should do?
Well, I'm a kind of guy that says maybe take that $150 or $300 I'm saving a year in Wyoming, and I'm going to put that towards a hunt, for maybe moose or sheep up north where I can just buy a hunt and go hunting. In the last 20 years, the moose populations in the lower 48 have plummeted. They've struggled everywhere. I don't see moose turning around. And even if moose turned around and all of a sudden, they were breeding like whitetails and we had moose running everywhere, there's still so many guys ahead of you on points where I don't know if that would be something that I would be, too concerned about. I mean, who knows? Moose could get COVID and then the wolves eat them all and then it's over. So I think we have much more of a chance of getting issues with maybe Wyoming changing the way that they give tags, and that's the thing that I always worry about is, if Wyoming, they are very, very generous to the non-residents. We get a lot of tags. If they ever switched it up, kind of like New Mexico has in the past, and we lose some of the percentage of tags available, then, that's going to affect it even more and make it worse. And, they'll be even take more points to draw. We look at what Arizona did with the Arizona Strip guys. A couple of years ago, they went to half the tags, went random. That put those guys, back so far from drawn tags. Who's to say that Wyoming someday doesn't do something like that and say, hey, instead of giving 75% of the tags, we're going to give 50 to random or change it up. And if you do that, then your points are even going to, you're still going to be years out from drawn. So I'm more worried about having less opportunity than I am things getting so awesome. And there's just, more animals we know what to do with. I think it's going to go the other way. I wouldn't be too concerned about that.
No, I think that's a good point, and I think that's well stated. As we see these states make adjustments to their draw and their point systems get older and older, they're not giving more preference to the guys that have been loyal to them. That's just the reality. No state has done that. They've all gone the other way. We need to recruit more applicants and more hunters and make this more appealing. So we're going to give more random shots, make the barrier to entry like Colorado, easier and cheaper to enter these draws. And therefore, if you say, well, I've been building my points, I'm loyal, they don't care. Not near as much.
Who's to say this? Who's to say they don't reinvent a new point system? I mean,
start over.
Montana had a point system, 40 years ago, and then it was a card system where you got cards in the mail, you had to mail the cards back. It was crazy. And then they went away from that, and then they started a new point system. Who's to say some of these states, when we have very mature systems, 30 years old, our kids start getting older and they're like, this is BS, 40 points behind. Who's to say they don't go to the legislation and change it? I mean, we don't know that. I mean, these point systems are so mature, anything can happen. I'm more worried about that than I am this magical wave of more moose and sheep appearing.
For sure. No, I think we're seeing that trend of more random, because talking about 20 or 30 points is one thing, but we're not far off from saying 40 to 60 points in some of these states, and that is not going to be appealing to the next generation. So my prediction is they'll either abolish it or severely weigh it to the new guys, and so they have a shot and they continue to play the game.
Yep. No, I agree 100%. And I honestly, I'm super appreciative of Wyoming. They're giving non-residents 40 plus, Rocky Mountain sheep tags a year. There's no state. Nevada is close to that, but not there. Wyoming's given more tags to non-residents than anyone else. Now, if you weren't, one of the original Huntin' Full guys that started 26 years ago, you're probably not in this position to draw one of those tags. But, you know, there is a ton of tags given in Wyoming, and Rockies are getting harder to get almost in deserts. And Wyoming has helped more guys get their Grand Slam than probably any other state. So,
Yep.
I mean, Wyoming's been really, really good to us. And, it's unfortunate that, the sheep numbers aren't doing as great as they can be, but, they're trying.
Well, that's all good information. Thanks for sharing that, Robert, and getting your take on what we should do in that state. I hope you can cash in your points someday. Are you going to draw moose this year?
I'm always trying to draw moose. I got lucky and drew a moose tag in Montana back in '04. And, you're probably still in high school back then. And I killed a big old bull, and I did it with a rifle, and I really want to kill one with a bow. So I'm, like I said, 41, and I figure I'll just keep riding this out and buying points. And I'm just hoping to outlive everybody, because I'm definitely not going to be luckier than anybody.
Well, stay away from COVID. Take your vitamins, and we'll see what happens. I'll push your walker someday out there to your moose. How about that?
That sounds good. Well, and the cool thing is if I'm that old, Wyoming, I'm going to shoot it with a crossbow.
Sounds good, man. Well, thanks for sharing this today, and catch another Built to Hunt podcast coming at you soon.
Thanks, bud.